Hey, it's Bruno here. Hey, listen, thanks a lot for saving our behinds with that dog breed model. The clients are super happy, and I know you worked hard this weekend instead of taking a break, so the CEO wants to actually speak with you. He told me that he is really impressed by your level of work and he wants to learn more about machine learning and some of the projects that you've been working on. Now, he's not an expert in machine learning, but he's a really smart guy. So, hopefully you're able to make a good impression because this might lead to you getting a promotion. He's also the one that hired me, so make sure you don't disappoint him. I told him you're a great person to talk to about machine learning. All right, we'll chat soon. Bye. Got more meetings to attend. All right, everybody, we're back at it again. We're about to talk to the CEO of Keiko Corp. But here's the thing. One of the skills that is really hard to find, or a skill that is hard to excel at, especially for engineers, programmers, and developers, is the ability to communicate with non-technical people. You see, in our day-to-day, we'll meet a lot of smart engineers. We'll meet a lot of people, a lot of coworkers that we can learn from. But it's very hard to find people that are really smart when it comes to programming, when it comes to machine learning, data science, or any technical topic, but also able to communicate with managers, with coworkers, with bosses, their findings. Good communication skill is one of those things that makes you stand out. People get promoted not necessarily because of their technical knowledge, but because of their ability to communicate with others, to work with others, to be empathetical to those around them. But in this section, we're going to learn about storytelling and communication, an important skill that most courses overlook. It's easy to say that, oh no, it's fine, I'll let my work speak for itself. But we live in a world where communication comes a long way. And if you're able to master communication and storytelling, you will stand out. So, let's get started.
Alrighty, welcome to the section, How to Think About Communicating and Sharing Your Work. Now, arguably, this is the most important section of the whole course. Well, maybe a close second. Because of course, the skills that you've learned in this course are foundationally important. But what the next step is now that you've got skills, what do you do next? And this whole section can be summed up in 3 words. Well, a question, really. And this is the most important question you can ask when communicating your work. And the reason I've got the framework here is because it's similar to step 1 in the framework, the problem definition. So what is the most important question you can ask? Who is it for? Or I've shortened it to who's it for, so it makes it into a nice 3-word congregation there. And then, because this is your start, you can build upon it. You can dig deeper. You've got an idea of who your work is for? What questions will they have? What needs do they have? What concerns can you address before they arise? The objective here, by asking who's it for, is to get on the level with the person you're communicating with. And now, of course, you'll never be able to fully answer these questions, but it pays to think about them in advance. Having a conversation with your potential audience is a warm-up for the actual conversation. Communicating your work is an unsolved challenge, but that's what makes it fun. What may make complete sense in your head may be a complete mystery to someone else. Now, let's have an example. If you want your message to be heard, it's not enough for you to deliver it in a way someone can hear it. Like if you imagine the man yelling on the street, he can be heard but not understood. You have to deliver the message in a way it can be understood, such as these girls in a group project here. Now, I've written the word potentially here is because of course they're being heard, but because communication is such a hard problem, it's not a definite that they'll be understood. Now, let's break it down. After asking yourself who's it for, you'll start to realize there are 2 main audiences for your work. People on your team and people outside your team. These can cross over, of course, and even be broken down into further categories, but these 2 categories are where we'll start. As you get a little bit of practice asking yourself who's it for, you'll start to realize your work isn't for everyone. A beginner's mistake is thinking too broadly. A message which appeals to everyone may convey information, but it'll lack substance. You want that gut punch reaction, so that's why we ask, who is it for? So you can get that message specifically to that person. Now, to begin, let's pretend you've asked yourself, who's it for? And your answer is someone who thinks like you. People on your team, your teammates, your manager. Someone on the internet reading about your latest technical project. Over the next few videos, we're going to break down some techniques that you can use to communicate and share your work with people on your team and people outside your team. So let's get started. Now, let's pretend you've asked yourself the most important question when communicating and sharing your work. Who's it for? You're communicating with people on your team. So AKA your boss, project manager, or your teammates. Now, something you should know is that all non-technical problems are communication problems. And often you'll find these harder to solve than the actual technical problems. You see, technical problems and technical challenges, unless bounded by the laws of physics, have a finite solution. But if you've ever had experience working with other people, you realize communication problems don't. And so going back to our most important question, after asking yourself, who's it for? A question you should follow up with is, what do they need to know? Now, the reason being is because what your teammates may need to know might be different to what your manager needs to know. And when answering this question for yourself, what do they need to know? Lean on the side of excess and write it down for later. The worst case is you figure out what's not needed. I've listed out some options here, but this could be an endless list. You could ask yourself, what's in the way? What have you done? What you're doing next? Who else could help? What not's needed? What's not clear? And you'll see this writing it down as a recurring theme in this section because writing helps to clear up your thinking. You may have lots of thoughts about what do they need to know, but without documenting them down, you'll never have a historical record of where you were right and wrong. Now, let's say we're talking about the project manager, the boss or the senior or the lead on a team. And your project manager, Amber, we're going to use Amber as an example. She has a mission. Aside from taking care of you and your team, she's determined to keep the project running on time. Oh, this one's the time one. And on budget. And this translates to keeping obstacles out of your way. So Amber's questions will often come in the form of some kind of what's holding you back. And now, it should go without saying, honesty is your best friend here. Life happens. When challenges come up, right, when roadblocks come up, Amber should know about them. That's what she's there for. She's there to help oversee and figure out these challenges. She's there to connect you with the right people who might be able to help. So, when preparing a report, align it to the questions and concerns your project manager, boss, senior, or lead may have. In our case, Amber. If you've asked yourself, what does Amber need to know? Start with those answers. Write them down. What's getting in your way? How can she help you out? Now, in the next video, let's think about how you might communicate with your teammates. So the people sitting right next to you, or maybe the people in the group chat. So you've asked yourself again, who's it for? And you've answered your own question, and it's the people you're working with, the ones you're sitting next to, or maybe they're in a group chat. And now in today's day and age, it saddens me how many communication channels there are, because most of them encourage communicating too often. Now, one thing you'll probably pick up is that unless it's an emergency, now is often never the best time. So let's break this down. Projects you work on will have arbitrarily long timelines with many milestones, plans, and steps. And keep in mind, the longer the timescale, the worse humans are at dealing with them. Break it down. Days and weeks are much easier units of time to understand. What are you working on this week? Write it down. Share it with the team. This not only consolidates your thinking, it gives your team an opportunity to ask questions and offer advice. You'll find that short-term progress often disappoints, but long-term progress surprises. Say if you're working on a 6-month project, you can break this down, like starting from 0 months, it might be hard to realize what's happening right at the end. So you break it down. You've got a 4-week month, you break 1 month into 4 weeks. and then you break 1 week into 5 days. I don't know about you, but when I try to think of something that's 6 months ahead, I have a lot of trouble. But when I break it down to go, what can I do today that's going to add up to this week? And what can I do in this month that's going to add up to this first month here? And then go, same for the next one, same for the third one. And then by the time I get to this end of 6 months, I realize, wow, I've actually come a long way, and it's all from breaking it down into days and weeks. Now, the first part of this is, what did you work on today? Now, of course, this is just one technique that you might want to try, but you could set a reminder for the end of each day and have it ask you, what did you work on today? Your response doesn't have to be too long, but it should be written down. You could use the following template. What I worked on today, so 1 to 3 points on what you did. Maybe you could do what's working, what's not working, what could be improved, and what I'm working on next. What's your next course of action based on the above, and why? What's holding you back? Remember that conversation you want to have with your project manager or team lead or something like that? They want to be able to remove roadblocks for you so you can get back to doing the work you're best at, to coding projects. Relate all of these back to the overall project goal. That 6-month project, pretty hard to understand in one go, but day by day, week by week, sending these updates through to your team, this is really going to help out. And so what you want to do is take note of the overlaps. Which questions arise? If a question gets asked more than 3 times, it should be documented somewhere for others to reference. And you'll see that some of the communication points for the people you're sitting with cross over with your project manager, just like we discussed before. Now, of course, I trust you're smart enough to figure out when the things that you're communicating with your teammates also need to be communicated with your project managers and seniors. It's going to be hard to put in any of these communication techniques with people on your team if you don't actually have a job or aren't on a team yet. So in the next video, we'll look at what to do before you have a job. As we've discussed, it can be hard to communicate with a project manager, boss, or teammates if you don't have a job. And if you've recently learned some skills through an online course and acquired some certificates, it can be tempting to jump straight into the next one and then get the next certificate and the next. But what are you really chasing? Are you after more certificates or more skills? Now, a thing you should remember is that no matter how good the course, you can assume the skills you learn there will be commoditized. That means many other people will have gone through the same course, acquired the certificates, same skills as you, and then will be looking for similar jobs to what you are. Now, let's say Janet posts a job vacancy and receives 673 applicants through an online form. You can imagine how hard it is for your resume to stand out. Now, this isn't to say you shouldn't apply through an online form, but if you are really serious about getting a role somewhere, start the job before you have it. How? By working on and sharing your own projects, which relate to the role you're applying for. I call this the weekend project principle. During the week, you're building foundational skills through various courses like the one you're going through now. But on the weekend, you design your own projects. Projects in line with the role you're after, and work on them. Working on your own projects helps you build specific knowledge. They're what compound this type of knowledge that you learn in courses into skill which can't be taught in courses. Let's see it in practice. Joe and Melissa apply for a data scientist role to Janet. They both make it through the interviews and are now sitting in the interview room with Janet. She looks at both their resumes and notices that they've both done similar courses. This is great. And she asks Joe if he's worked on any of his own projects, and he tells her no, he's only had a chance to work on coursework, but has plenty of ideas. Now, she asks Melissa the same question, and she pulls out her phone and tells Janet that she's built a small app to help read food labels. Now, you see, Melissa's daughter can't have gluten, and got confused every time she tried to figure out what was in the food she was eating. Now, the app Melissa has built isn't perfect, but it helps her daughter figure out what food she should eat. Now, I want you to ask yourself, if you were Janet, which candidate would you lean towards? You see, working on your own projects helps you build specific knowledge. I can't stress this enough. Your own projects are what compound knowledge into skill. Now, what should you work on? See, the hard part is you've got unlimited options. But the best part is you've got unlimited options. One method is to find out the ideal company, as we said before, you want to work for, and then figure out, do your research. What does a person in that position do day to day? Find out, and then design your own 6-week project. You might be wondering, why 6 weeks? Well, the worst case is, if it doesn't work out, it's only 6 weeks. And the best case is, you're going to surprise yourself at what you can accomplish in 42 days. Now, if you're still stuck, you can follow your interests. Use this same sort of timeline. If you don't have an ideal company you'd like to work for, think of an ideal role you'd like to work for. Design it yourself. Again, the worst case is, after 6 weeks, you'll know whether to pursue something you're working on, aka set up another 6-week project, or move on to the next thing. Now, instead of only having a collection of certificates, you've got a story to tell. You've got evidence of you trying to put in what you've learned into practice. Exactly what you'll be doing on a job. And if you're wondering where the evidence comes from, it comes from you documenting your work, writing it down. Where? On your own blog. You might be wondering, why a blog? I'm not even a writer. We've discussed this before, but it's worth repeating because writing down what you're working on helps solidify your thinking. At the same time as helping others on a similar journey to learn from you what you've done. What would you like to have known when you were at week 1? That's the things you can write about. You could start with a post per week, detailing how your 6-week project is going, what you figured out in week 1, what you figured out in the next week, what you're doing in week 3. Remember, what's something you'd like to have known sooner? Probably the best type of post you can write is helping your past self, because if you had a question on something, likelihood someone else will have a similar question. Now again, remember, your project doesn't have to be perfect. None are. And your writing doesn't have to be perfect either. But by the end of the 6 weeks, the beautiful thing is, you're going to have a series of articles detailing your work, as well as something that you can point at and say, this is what I've done. Now, if you're looking for resources to start a blog, I'll leave some in the resources section. But at the moment, DevBlog by Hashnode and Fast Template by the Fast AI team are both free and require almost zero setup to get started. Otherwise, Medium is the next place to get writing and to get sharing your own projects. You can share your articles on Twitter, LinkedIn, or even, if you're tactical enough, send them directly to the person in charge of hiring for the role you're after. All right, so now we've looked at communicating with your team and starting a job before you have it, designing your own 6-week projects to build specific knowledge. And one of the best ways to communicate and share your work is documenting it on your blog. Let's find out how you might communicate with people outside your team, the kind of people who might be reading your blog. Let's say you've asked yourself once again when you're trying to communicate your work, who's it for? And the answer is people outside your team. So clients, customers, fans. It's also really important, after you've asked who's it for, to follow up with that other question we talked about. What do they need to know? And now, again, remember, always, the line here between these two groups isn't set in stone. They have overlaps. These exercises we're going through are only to get you thinking from a perspective of the person you're trying to communicate with. What do they need to know? Now, I think this one is best explained with a little story that I have. Now, I made a presentation for a board meeting once. We were there to present our results on a recent software proof of concept to some executives. And now, being an engineer, my presentation slides were clogged with detailed text, barely large enough to read. It contained every single detail of the project, the techniques used, equations, algorithms, acronyms, with no definition. The presentation looked great to other engineers, but caused the executives to squint, lean in, and basically ignore everything I was saying to just try and read what was on the slides. But once we made it to the end, a slide with a visual appeared, to which I palmed off as basically unnecessary. Oh, don't worry about that. But this immediately sparked the interest of the executives. One of them asked, "What's that?" And we spent the next 45 minutes discussing that one slide in detail. The slide which, to me, didn't matter. Now, the lesson here is what you think is important may be the opposite to others. And what's obvious to you, what was obvious to me on this slide, may be amazing to someone else. Now, knowing this, obvious to you, but amazing to others, you'll start to realize, unless they directly tell you, figuring out what your clients, customers, and fans want to know is a challenge. And a solution to this is to ask. So most people have a lot to offer. Like in my original presentation, no one was saying anything because I was just trying to read the slides. But once we got to something that sparked their interest, they had a lot to say. So remember, most people have a lot to offer, but rarely volunteer it. Ask if what you're saying is clear. Ask if there is anything else they'd like to see, which is what we were talking about here for 45 minutes. Once I realized, oh wait, there is a lot of other things they'd like to see. Now, of course, you may get something left of field, things that you're unsure of. In these cases, it's up to you to address them before they become larger issues. Don't forget, sometimes the best answer is, I don't know, but I'll figure it out and get back to you. Or, that's not what we're focused on for now, and then bringing it back to what you are focused on. So these things are just some of the tricks of the trade that I've picked up over time. In the next video, we're going to wrap this all up, put together what we've talked about in the last few videos. Now, we've covered a lot of ground in only a few short videos, but the final question I want you to ask yourself is, what story are you trying to tell? Now, a little anecdote here is, you're going to underestimate and overestimate your work at the same time. Now, this is a good thing because no one is going to care as much about your work as you. It's up to you to be your own biggest fan as well as your own harshest critic at the same time. Now, when sharing your work, you could just drop the facts in. A straight up list of nothing but, here's exactly what I did. But everyone else can do that too. Working what you've done into a story, sharing what worked, what didn't, why you went in one direction and not another, is hard. But that's exactly why it's worth it. Again, I will say it until I go hoarse. How you deliver your message will depend on who your audience is. Always ask, who's it for? And follow up with, what do they need to know? Because it means you're going to have to be specific. And being specific means you're going to have to say, it's not for you to a lot of people. Even if you don't actually say it to them, that means when you're specific, you say, this is who my work is for. This is who I'm talking with. Doing this takes courage, but it also means the ones who receive your message will engage with it more. Write it down. You're going to get lost in thought, but found in the words. Writing is nature's way of showing you how sloppy your thinking is. Break your larger projects down into a series of sub-projects. What did you work on today? What's on tomorrow? What's on this week? Tell yourself, tell your team. Take advantage of Cunningham's law. Sometimes the best way to figure out the right answer isn't to ask a question, it's to put the wrong answer out there. Finally, remind yourself, you're not going for perfection. You're going for progress. Going for perfection gets in the way of progress. You know you should have your own blog. You know you should be building specific knowledge by working on your own projects. You know you should be documenting what you've been working on. The upside of being able to say, here's what I've done, far outweighs any potential downside of being wrong. I want you to know that if you do create something, which you should, with the skills that you've learned in this course, your own project, a way to build specific knowledge, once you've documented on your blog, be sure to share it with the community. Mention my name in the Discord chat, and I'll check it out. I'm excited to see what you make, and more importantly, I'm excited to see what you share.